Jacob and Maria established our roots in 1837 when they came to Knox Township from Switzerland. There are two important events in Jacob and Maria's life that eventually led to this reunion. The first was their marriage, and the second was their decision to leave Switzerland and settle in Ohio. I want to give you a brief overview of these two events as I understand them today. With the additional research that I plan to do after my retirement on December 31st, I expect to answer these two questions in even more detail. First, the marriage. We know that Jacob Yaggi came from Link and Maria Hari from Adelboden. The marriage was in Adelboden on May 15, 1835. The towns of Link and Adelboden are each at the end of a beautiful valley, and the valleys are adjacent and parallel to each other. Today, to get from one town to the other, you have several choices. If you start in Adelboden, one option is to get on a bus, travel partway down the valley, get on a train which takes you to the bottom or the beginning of the valley. There you transfer to another train that takes you around the mountain to the beginning of the Link Valley. You again transfer and take the train up the valley to Link. The second option is to walk from Adelboden up the side of the valley to the Hahnemoos Pass. Then you walk across the pass, which looks like a large mountain meadow. In this meadow in the summer, the townspeople of Adelboden and Link would meet for social activities like games and picnics. Then you walk down a very steep valley side into the town of Link. The walking route is very short compared to taking the train, but the train is much faster and certainly easier. Maria Hari and Jacob Yaggi would have gotten together by walking from each town up to the Hahnemoos Pass and meeting there. The reason that Maria and Jacob met was because Jacob Yaggi's mother was from Adelboden. That was the connection for Jacob and Maria. So the real question is, how did Jacob Yaggi's parents, Christian Yaggi of Link and Margaretha Buren of Adelboden, meet so that they subsequently could get married on July 6, 1798? The answer seems to be that the activities of the Hahnemoos Pass provided an easy means of meeting each other. The second important decision was to leave Switzerland and come to Knox Township in 1837. Prior to 1800, Switzerland was a confederation of cantons or states, each with its own individual culture and self-government. This national structure provided diversity in its institutions and in its social, intellectual, and religious life. In France, on the other hand, King Louis XVI was trying to impose a uniformity on the whole of France. On July 14, 1789, the ancient prison fortress of the Bastille was stormed, the king was beheaded, and terror throughout France followed that horrified Europe. But for the people of Europe, This was, in fact, the dawn of liberty and equality, which was declared in the first French Constitution by stating that sovereignty resides in the people. At the close of the 17th century, this gave hope to that would be at the close of the 18th century. This gave hope to the underprivileged of Switzerland, who constituted 7/8 of the Swiss population. The issue the Swiss had to face was how far they and their institutions would be caught up in their neighbor's revolution, and whether their tradition of neutrality could stand the test of the European war, which had broken out against France in her quest of a new world concept. It became, in a sense, a struggle between two worlds and two generations. The average age of the coalition generals opposing France was over 70, while the French generals, who had called their whole nation to arms, were under 40. The youngest of them was the most brilliant, Napoleon Bonaparte. At the start of the revolution, he was just 20. Only 7 years later, he led his army through North Italy, stopping at the southern borders of Switzerland. German-speaking Swiss were against France, while French-speaking were sympathetic. In spite of this internal tension, Switzerland remained neutral. But in 1797, France invaded Switzerland, and by 1798, France occupied and controlled the country. Until the final Battle of Waterloo on June 18, 1815, Switzerland was devastated by invading armies, crossing here and there, leaving death, havoc, and ruin in their paths. It was into this turmoil that Jacob Yaggi was born in 1809 and Maria Hari in 1813. The Swiss suffered even more with the famine years of 1816 and 1817, when Jacob was 7 and Maria was 3 years old. Between the famine of 1817 and their marriage in 1835, the Swiss experienced a period of thirsting for liberty and national unity. In 1829, freedom of the press was finally gained. Social, political, and economic forces fired a movement of change for the country. This regeneration movement grew into a national rebellion that eventually helped secure sovereignty of the people, representative democracy, open meetings, and freedom of speech, association, and settlement. Intertwined in this tumultuous time was the religious divisions of the Catholics and the Protestants. At the time of their Protestant marriage in 1835, Jacob and Maria had spent their entire lives in turmoil. It is clear why life in the United States had great appeal. When I stood on the porch of my hotel in Adelboden 2 years ago, looking out at the beautiful, majestic mountains, the lush green valley, and the beautiful, prosperous farms, I asked Marcia, why would anyone want to leave this paradise? After this research, we can begin to understand why. But it seems the most important reason that Maria and Jacob Yaggi came to Knox Township in 1837 is that Jacob's sister, Maria Yaggi, had come to the United States 2 years earlier. married John Clement and was living in Knox Township. So as we look at the possible reasons for Maria and Jacob getting married and reasons for coming to Knox Township, family connections seem to play a major part in these developments. Additional research in these events will hopefully uncover more important information for us. Jacob and Maria had 6 children that reached adulthood. Jim McFarland is going to ask us to which child each of us is related. Jim?
Thank you, Lowell. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight and making this a success. When John Robert and I first got together, we thought maybe if we had 50 people it would be a success. Last count between the 2 days, it was 102 of you. Congratulate yourself. At this time, my card lady here, Vanna White, will hold this up, and as he told you the history of Jacob and Maria, we now come to the United States, and where do we fit in, and why are we here tonight? Is because of one of these. And as I bring up the name of the descendant, if you'd like to just raise your hand and say that you're from that area. If you're not sure what area you're from, there's a chart in the back that a family tree, or look at your brother or sister or father or mother, and if they raise their hand, good chance you. Okay, Mary Kristen, born in 1835. Are there any descendants of Mary here? You know there are some here, but not here, but there are some in the area, but apparently not here tonight.
I have a sugar and creamer that belongs to that family.
You do? Why they're here? Because you
get half a vote there.
Any descendants of Jacob, who was born in 1838?
Sure.
If anybody says that they are a descendant of Jacob, we have a DNA expert, man. But Jacob was never married. So that's sort of a trick question. This is a church family now. Any descendants of Christian, who was born in 1840? Okay. Good amount. Any descendants of Susanna, who was born in 1842? Reichenbach. They didn't have any kids. They didn't have any kids. Another trick question. Looks like Christian made up. Another big one, I see a lot of pride. Emmanuel people, if you like to. Yeah. Okay, well, all the our tractors will be the Christian side, the side of the tractor pull later on. And any of Elizabeth, Buter.
An overview of the early church.
Thanks, Lowell. History of the Bethel Evangelical and Reformed Church. During the 1820s, many of the early settlers of Knox Township came from Pennsylvania. Among them were Jacob Monk, Samuel Hoffman, and David Ramsayer. After becoming settled, they wanted to have a place to conduct religious services. So in 1830, they organized what is today the Bethel Reformed Church. For the first 10 years, services were held in different homes. And in 1840, they built a new log church on the same site as the present church stands. The site was sold to the church by Jacob Zuber. Others who came to the area and were members who helped build the log church were the Bandys, the Barchleys, the Zimmermans, and our very own Jacob Yaggi. The church was founded as the Evangelical Reformed and Lutheran Church and remains as such today. The representatives of the Reformed part of the church were the Monk, Zubrik, and Yaggi families. The representatives of the Lutherans were the Hoffmans and the Ramsayer families. The congregation worshipped in the log church until the late 1850s, at which time they decided to build a new brick church. In 1861, the new church was completed. Though smaller than originally planned, it still measured 30 feet by 40 feet. This new church is known today as the Bethel Church, and the church was completed late in the pastorate of Reverend G. Ziegler. According to one source, during Morgan's raid in Columbiana County, while services were being held in the church, a man on horseback came and interrupted the services to call everyone to go back to their homes to protect their property from the Morgan raiders. All left except for the minister and John Hoffman and his wife, who stayed to finish the service. The church remained as built until 1888, when under the pastorate of J.B. Zumpy, a new roof, a new fence on the south and east sides of the church, and a fresh coat of paint wrap. The committee in charge of these improvements included Louis Bandy and Mr. Zurbrugg and our very own Christian Yaggi. Many outsiders as well as members of the congregation helped with the work, which was all done gratis. The church remained without substantial change until 1903, when a new furnace was installed. Then in 1909, a slate roof was added, and the church was painted yet again. At this time, a John Bergman died and left the church $250, provided that $150 of it be spent on the church, which paid for the roof. And the remaining $100 he used to purchase a belt upon which his name would be engraved. The latter was rejected, and the $100 was returned. In the fall of 1921, it was decided to build an addition for a Sunday school room. Later, the church was again remodeled, adding memorial windows, enlarging the auditorium and the vestibule. And the exterior was finished with stucco, and in 1929, electricity was installed. And that would bring us to the more, recent history of the church. Thank you.
Beth Bence-Hari will read Maria Yaggi's obituary, which tells us a lot about her.
Christian Hari, and widow of Jacob Yaggi, died on November 6, 1889, at her home in Knox Township, Columbiana County, Ohio, at the age of 76 years, 6 months, 14 days. Mother Yaggi was born in Adelboden, Canton Bern, Switzerland. She united with the Reformed Church in the year 1829, of which she remained a faithful and consistent member to the time of her death. She was married to Jacob Yaggi May 15, 1835. They emigrated to America AD 1837. Their union was blessed with 9 children, of whom 3 have preceded them to the eternal world. Her husband preceded her in death 21 years ago. She had been a sufferer caused by paralysis for the last 7 years of her life. Sad but glorious was the day when her loving daughter, who cared for her during her lingering illness, as a mother only could care for her child, stood at the deathbed of earth's treasures and best friend and said farewell, but not forever. The stream is narrow, and almost from the very gates of life, her voice is heard, exultant in victory over the last foe. For many long years, until the yellow leaves of November of '89 covered the ground, she suffered. But her death was a complete and perfect victory, so ready, so eager to go, for over the swelling tide were many loved ones. She is gone, but not lost, but awaiting her loved ones on the other shore. She leaves to mourn her 6 children, 3 sons and 3 daughters, and 15 grandchildren, all of whom are within the bonds of the Reformed Church.
1940 letter of Emma Stoll recalling Jacob and Maria Yaggi, Emma's grandfather and grandmother.
Emma was the oldest daughter of Mary Yaggi, the one child that they brought across the seas with them from Switzerland. And she married Abe Kristen. And this letter is from Emma Stoll, her daughter. Dear Cousin Jeanette, my mother had written a letter to her. We'll try this afternoon to answer your most welcome letter, which you sent more than a week ago. I was so glad to hear from you and hope this finds you and all of yours in good health. I'm not so well at times, but I'm much better than I was some time ago, for which I am thankful. My heart takes bad spells at times, and I have high blood pressure. So I do not feel very good at times, but as long as I'm able to be up and do not have to be down in bed, I must not complain, but be thankful that it is not worse. You asked about some things about grandfather and grandmother Yaggi, which I will now answer as best I know. But some things I have forgotten, and I am not so sure of. I do not know what year your grandfather was born, but I do know that he died in August 11th, 1868. We know he was born in 1840, at the age of 59 years, 1 month and 8 days. His parents' names I do not know. Grandmother was born the 23rd of April in the year 1813 and was baptized the 25th of the same month in Adelboden and was confirmed in 1829. Her father's name was Christian Hari, and her mother's name was Susanna Alig. They would be Jess Hari's grandparents. I've talked tonight with Carl Hari about this person. They would be Jess Hari's grandparents. I mean Jess, who lives in Alliance. Grandfather Jacob Yaggi and grandmother Maria Hari Yaggi were married in the year 1835. They lived in Adelboden for the first 2 years, then came to America in the year 1837. To them, 9 children were born, 5 boys and 4 girls. Mother was the only one they brought over the ocean. The rest were all born here. And then she lists the children. Mary, born in the year 1835, died in 1900. Uncle Jacob, born the year 1838, died in 1911. Aunt Susanna was born in 1842 and died in 1926. Uncle Christian was born, we know, in 1840 and died in 1894, I believe. Uncle Emmanuel died in 1909. Aunt Elizabeth in 1896. Then she lists the 3 children. Uncle Ferdinand, Aunt Emily, Uncle Henry. The last 3 of these children all died when they were very young. Henry, I don't think that he was quite a year old. The other 2, just a few years old. You think that sometime they lived there where John Hunter's house now is. I do not know if they ever lived there or not. Speaking to my mother. You may be right, but I don't remember of them ever being there. I may have forgotten it, but I do know that Uncle Christ and Aunt Lucinda first went to housekeeping at the place where John Hunter now lives. Now, we believe this to be the property right across the street from John Robert today, where the log cabin, and as you know, we have pictures back here of the log cabin. They had some friends that they always helped each other and neighbored back and forth that lived there. Their names were Gerber. Anna Gerber was the woman's name. She and grandmother always helped each other so much when one or the other was in need of help. Up on the farm where Frank Bandy lived, there stood an old log house south of the lane, right across from the woods, west of the road. That is the place where they lived a long time, and I believe that place and here, where we now live, is where the whole family were born, all but Mother, the one who was born in Switzerland. For I know that that is the house Mother and Uncle Jacob and Uncle Christ, as a baby in the cradle, used to stay all day long with only Mother to take care of the two boys when grandmother would go out and work in the field, and grandmother used to work up the milk that they had into little cheese and then had no cellar to keep it in. So she would carry them, all the cheeses, up all the way from there over to where John Hunter now lives, for Mrs. Gerber to keep and look after them. Oh, how hard they used to have to work. Now they and their whole family have passed away, and we, their grandchildren, are getting old. Well, I must stop writing, for writing does not go very good with me. I am so nervous and shaky. You may not be able to read some of it. Love to all, and wish you and all yours a joyous Easter time, for Christ is risen, and with him we too shall rise. Do you remember Preacher Clark on Easter morning? He did not say good morning, but he always said, Der Herr ist auferstanden. This says, Christ is risen. And I just want to add that Pastor Clark was, as you heard, one of the early pastors. Our Uncle Dr. Henry Clark Yaggi was named for Pastor Clark. And his son was Henry Clark Yaggi II. His three children are here right now. Hank is Henry Clark Yaggi III. And Hank has a son who is a resident in New Haven, Connecticut, whose name is Dr. Henry Clark Yaggi IV. And I just had to share this little piece of jewelry that I'm wearing. On the back, it says, well, it's engraved with my mother's initials, Frances Jeanette Yaggi. And on the back, it says, from Grace and Henry. And it gives the date, October 21st, 1908. And I want you to know, in this world of computers, my husband was able, we tried to figure out what event she would have this. Knowing that she had opened a piano studio on the Alliance, we thought maybe they had given this to her, because that would have been about the year. But because of computers, my husband was able to pull up the fact that this very day was the day that Aunt Grace and Uncle Doctor were married. And I'm sure she was given this. So as I walk in here with this rare piece of jewelry, Marcia tells me she has Aunt Grace's that matches it.
Being a doctor myself, I want you to know that he is a medical resident in New Haven. Not a residing person that just lives there. Researching family history takes lots of time, energy, and mystery-solving skills. I want to call on Dave McFarland, who is Mr. Yaggi Information. He will explain his exhibit.
I only get 30 seconds. I don't know if you've been able to fight your way around the crowd tonight. Over in the corner here, there's a big board, and we've tried to outline the Yaggi family there back to I think about 1600 it goes. But we're more concerned with Jacob and Maria and on down there. I would appreciate it if you get a chance to look. I know you want to see, well, where do I fit in here? We hope. And we hope you find your name. You might not. This has been going on for a while, and there may be some mistakes on there. And if they are, please let us know. And if there are vacancies there and dates that we don't have, you'll find on the table in front of it a family group sheet. Take one of these, take your time, fill it out correctly. My name and address is in the bottom of the sheet there, and send it to me. And there could be some mistakes in there, and there's an awful lot of vacancies, because you realize as you go down the generation, we get farther and farther apart. So I would appreciate it if you could help us out on that.
Nancy Hofer Cole will explain to us about some wonderful documents her mother Helen came to possess and are on display for us.
I got drafted to do this because my mother is shy. But I want you to know who my mother is, because I only know what she tells me. So if you want to know really what's going on, you need to talk to her. Lois Hofer. Put your hand up, Mom. All right. Many afternoons are spent around the table looking at old family documents and pictures and all kinds of things. She's brought some of them with her tonight here at the back table. She has the Bible that belonged to Maria from the 1850s. It's in German, but you tell her name. There are some documents also written in German, but on leather, on skin. And if you look at them, they were sewn together to close. They were written and then sewn shut. What else is back there? Her pretzel iron. Some of you may have not had the experience of Swiss pretzels before. They are a lot of work. So this generation does not do this very much, but Mother's generation does. So her iron is back there, and I think some samples. And I think they've been sampled already, and they're good.
I can testify they're good to me.
Yes. So, again, look back there and see what's back there, and get in touch with Lois if there's anything you don't know about the Emanuel side of the family. She got the thing, she had heard that Maria Yaggi Clemens things, her Bible and her papers from the Arthur Borton family. Arthur's wife, who was Mary Roth, and Mom's grandmother, who was Nancy Roth, were sisters. And that's how those things came into our family.
I spent 2 hours yesterday at Lois's kitchen table poring over these interesting documents, and then approximately 45 minutes poring over lunch and these special pretzels. I recommend visiting her anytime. I would like to call upon Herman Yaggi Carr to lead the final part of the program, which is for questions and discussions.
I already have heard some things tonight that raise some questions, and we'll welcome, if any of you have questions, why don't you raise them. Now, I'll ask you to, I guess you're going to I heard earlier, you're going to either be from the Christian Yaggi, the Manuel Yaggi, or the Elizabeth Yaggi family. Identify which your family is, raise your question, and we'll find out if somebody here can't answer it for us, or if you have a comment, some new information that you would provide, please do that. So why don't we take off, and Yaggis, just don't all talk at once, that's fine. And you say that's a picture.
Yes. It was in charcoal. My sister Lois had that transposed.
It's Emmanuel, Donna.
Emmanuel, I'm sorry.
Oh, Emmanuel. When I was on the impression there was no photograph of Jacob and Maria, but there were of the other children. And I think it must have been right about the time of the Civil War when you first began to see photographs. So that kind of identifies it. I saw Hank's hand.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about Grindelwald, and there was a note in one of the discussions about
A letter from
residents.
I saw a question coming, but I heard it.
So I just wonder, because we're trying to figure out just where Grindelwald fits into the picture.
The letter that Mary read, remember, said that they were married in, what was it, 1835 in Alabama, and they lived there for 2 years until they came to America in 1837. There is some common thought going around, and I don't know if it's right or not, maybe you can straighten this out, that actually they went to housekeeping in Grindelwald. We even had, in fact, Hank has 3 pictures of the houses back there. We think, some of us at least think that's where they went to housekeeping. Is this true? Did they not spend those 2 years from 35 to 37 entirely in Alabama, but they actually maybe were living in Grindelwald for what, 2 months, a year, or I don't know. Who has some knowledge or insight on that? This is a real question.
I have a necklace and 2 pins belong to Annie Yaggi. She's 80 weeks.
They belong to
Ada Yaggi Gerber,
Ada Yaggi Gerber.
my brother's sister. I mean, my father's sister.
Now,
Out of
could
the
you place
Emmanuel
it
Yaggi's.
in the Manuel Yaggi
Yes.
family.
And she
Right.
has over
Right.
last time he passed away. So this is her necklace. And these 2 pins, and 2 of my granddaughters have her rings, which are rubies.
Right. And anywhere in that, was there any information that might have said that the mother and father, Jacob and Maria, lived in Grindelwald or Alabama? A key would be, didn't you say? Okay. Okay. There are 3 hands here.
This was on your question. In 1968, I was a medical resident, and I wrote 9 members of the family asking them for $30, and with my $30 I had $300, and I hired a genealogist in New York City and asked her to research the Switzerland connection. And at that time, the information that I had was Grindelwald.
That you had.
That we thought they came from Grindelwald. So the genealogist established the marriage in Adelboden, but in her contacts over there, they ran into a dead end in Grindelwald. And so she said, we're at a dead end, but we're working on it. And then it was like 2 months later, she called me, and she said, well, from Adelboden, we have traced it, and the connection is not Grindelwald, but it's Link. So that was something related to that issue. But whether they lived there after marriage, that would not fall into the genealogist's information.
Jay McFarland, the computer says that Mary Yaggi was born in Lane in 1835, but where were they in 36 and 37? Any more information? I saw him back here.
Well, we went to Switzerland and we went to Grindelwald.
Right.
We went, and I've been corresponding for 10 years with Hans Kaufman and Elizabeth Bauer. And he said his father's mother was Mary Ann Yaggi. And the picture that my grandfather had, and I showed them at the hotel the picture of the chalet.
Yes.
And by the way the mountains were,
Right.
I kept walking down saying, "Wo ist das Haus?" And they showed me, and I walked up to this little man, and I showed him. He says, "Das ist mein Haus." And I told him who I was, and they invited us in. We had cooking and coffee, and we've been corresponding now for 10 years. My son was just over there less than a month ago, and my brother's son went there. So I don't know where
That's
Mary
the
Ann
foot of the-
Yaggi comes from.
That's the foot of the Eiger.
Don't leave tonight without talking to me.
But that still doesn't say whether,
I said, "Yaggi." He says, "Yeah." Das ist me.
there are lots of Yaggis in Grindelwald, but the question is...
Well, it's the same
Jacob
house
and
where the
Mary.
picture is that my grandfather had.
Yes.
And then my brother and his wife went there on honeymoon, and they took a picture in the same place, and I took a picture in the same place, and they...
Now, did your grandfather also go to Lake?
German and the next one English is fixed.
Mary?
Well, I have to say, as we grew up with all the family talk, the only two counties we ever heard mentioned were Ottawa and Grindelwald. And there was a very prized picture that my mother had, and it was Grindelwald. And I can distinctly remember with my artistic abilities of a 2-year-old and a cubicle pair of scissors trimming this picture, and I distinctly remember the day today. And there is a Xerox copy back there of it, but I carried that picture to the Grindelwald. And I talked with an older man in the hotel there, and he absolutely identified the hill in that picture, and we went down and we saw it. So it appeared, and yet when we were in Ottawa, we met the man who was the president of the people of Ottawa, and was in Ottawa. And I said to him, well, how would a boy from Lake, we never got the word Lake until the professional genealogist gave us this information. And I said, how on earth in those days would a boy from Lake ever meet a girl from Ottawa? Because we had driven way out the valley, around to Lake Tune, way up the mountain. Ottawa was so high the trains don't go up there. You have to go by postal bus or a car. And you're advised to take boats. But he got back to flying back. And he said, oh, it's that simple. In the summer when it snows now, the youth of Ottawa and the youth of Langley travel up from Hollywood together. And I thought, and never picked up that little trace ticket. So there may have been a point in the Grindelwald where we don't have a point in that picture.
Do you agree there's a little discrepancy between that story and what you just read from those letters? They were in Lake.
All I know,
1835 to 1837.
we never heard the word Lake in our time.
We never heard the word Lake because we had pictures of the mountains of Lake.
Well, we did hear Grindelwald. And I will say, when we went to Lake, I could not believe my eyes. We went in there to a kindergarten. We went into the cemetery, and I almost recognized everyone on their tombstone, as things I heard my mother say, from this very area down Dozier, barbecue, Zerba, all the names we knew. The man who took us and took us out to the chalet, that was the Yaggi chalet.
It was Jaggi. And I've been working on trying to find out when the change came to Y. In the 1840, 50, 60, and 70 national census, it is still Jaggi. Another interesting finding was that in all the national census, from that time they would go to your door and get the information that Maria Yaggi, I pronounce it Maria, her name in all the census is Mary, M-A-R-Y. So there are different spellings, and there's another document or a letter where it was Y-O-C-K-E-Y. Is that back on the table? So when we look at spellings, as you get into the genealogy, particularly of the Yaggis, there are different spellings at different times. And apparently when you came through Ellis Island and checked in, and the guy, he wrote down what he heard, and you don't know what your official name might have been. So I found that interesting, that the name, the spelling does vary from time to time.
Some of you may be aware that when you go to Europe and try to look up something like Yaggi telephone book, you don't know whether to look under I, or under J, or under Y. And I have a modern miracle of computer age here, audio-visual age, which will show you that I and a J, when put together, give you a Y. You can look for I, J, and Y. Question back there.
I'm Donna Yaggi. I'm married to Jim Yaggi. I noticed in the history there are a lot of doctors in the family. My daughter and I are both nurses. I wondered if there were any other people in the medical field.
I have to share with you a story. When I was a graduate student, one of my colleagues, I didn't have my doctorate in physics, but one of my colleagues had just gotten his doctorate, and he lived in the married student housing. And the afternoon, after he had just passed his exam, a little girl in the neighborhood fell down and hurt her knee. And one of the other girls there said to this fellow's daughter, he said, "Oh, run home and get your daddy. We need a doctor." And she said, "Oh, that won't do you any good. He's the talking kind." And magnetic resonance imaging now, where you get a lot of physicists and MDs together, the talking kind has a PhD after his name, and the medical kind has a doctor in front of his name. So that's how they choose to distinguish it. But I like the way the little girl did.
I would say that in modern medicine, the most outstanding Yaggi that is in medicine, the most outstanding doctor Yaggi that's in medicine is Herman Carr. He is a PhD. He was involved in the development of the MRI, which has, tremendously impacted diagnostic techniques. So he's not an MD, but he is a doctor and has impacted medicine, has been in medicine because of his contribution to the MRI procedure.
Lots of physics experiments with MRI, but no medical or clinical ones, although he has been a patient. Sometimes when working there late at night, the medical people need a patient. They were doing some MRIs in the brain, and they would ask for volunteers. And once in a while, late at night, I might have been the only one around, and they say to some words, look at my brain. I'm glad they always claim there was something there. When they first brought the MRI machine into the laboratory where I worked, they needed to test it, just to do some test runs. So they passed the word around the living room to volunteers. We got lots of volunteers the first few days. And then someone started an nasty rumor that they would measure your IQ with an MRI. Any more questions back on the Yaggi? Yes.
Is there any indication of any of Jacob's sons serving in the Civil War?
Any information? I'm only here to coordinate the question.
On which side?
Not to answer.
Well, either Jacob, a Christian, or Emmanuel, because they would be about that age, I would think.
They would have to have been born probably by at least 1850.
1840.
There was 9 of them.
1840.
Or five fighting soldiers.
The size of the family, I expect there was, but I haven't read any stories or any specific incidents that bring anybody to mind.
That's good. One
That's
field general
something
stunt
that
the
I have
experts.
to keep in the back of my mind as I go through this, particularly in that time period.
And if they were about that age, how would they?
Jacob was born in 38 and Christian was born in 40.
Right about 25.
No. Does anyone know did the Reformed Church or the Lutheran Church have any stance like those in the extraordinary East churches like the Brethren did? I know on the far side of the family I had an ancestor that was read out of the Quaker meeting for having learned the art of war. That was around 1776. But I'm not sure about the Yaggi family.
I've got something that I'll throw out. This doesn't have to do with that, but it goes back to the spelling. I have a copy of part of the abstract of my property. Jacob bought it in 1840, and he turned around and sold it in 1851. And if you look, there are 4 different spellings, and none of them are spelled like it's spelled today. So
All 4 different variations of the same one. Yes.
To my knowledge, and I have a lot of the old obituaries, I answered this question about the Civil War, and being familiar with the cemetery, and they put the flags on the veterans. No, none of them were, because they have the sticker for the Civil War, none of those carry any. The local veterans organizations do a good job of decorating the graves, and they, to my knowledge, no. So I help participate in decorating the graves myself.
Eleanor Fike had a question.
Yes,
Are you related to my Uncle
I am your Uncle Herman Carr's son.
I know you would be that.
And sitting right.
Look up here,
I hope there is some resemblance. I missed your last part of your question. Probably a gene somewhere. Wade was telling a story about, a good story about the Jake, tell me that story.
We have a picture of Henry Clay. I've seen it. Judson's age was in the 20s. Our son, Henry Clay, in the 40s. We were trying to figure out just who we favored. It was either my wife or myself. And when we saw that picture, the cable was into also, it was that's who he resembles in a very, very dramatic way. It's really kind of interesting.
So those genes probably carried the message. Right, Vandy? Maybe. Mary Vandy's a geneticist. Any other questions?
Comments?
Fine. You're representing a whole family, aren't you?
Yes, the whole line. There aren't that many of us from Elizabeth. That's right. My name is Phil Harlan, and Elizabeth was my second great-grandmother. She lived on where she lived most of her married life was the same farm that I grew up on. I want to make one introduction before I forget, and the current pastor at Bethel is here with us tonight, and that's Reverend Shane Estes and his wife Robin. And hopefully, a lot of you can come tomorrow and join us in our church service at Bethel. I know a lot of you plan on doing that. I have a couple more items I just dying to read out of this 108th anniversary of Bethel. which he was reading out of. A couple more things. Let's see. Mr. J.S., this is on one of the buildings that they built. At the time of the church service following Mr. Coy's address, the Christian World editor preached the dedicatory sermon. Preceding these two addresses, Pastor Keppel conducted the formal dedication service. In connection with it, Mr. J.S. Yaggi, which is John Sr., I believe, the Sunday school superintendent and chairman of the building committee, made his report and turned the building over to the congregation. And then it says over here, we saw enough of Superintendent Yaggi's school, which had 226 enrollment at that time, which he has superintended for a quarter of a century, to note that a Sunday school out in the open country may be doing first-class work. All the church in the school and all the school in the church. That's the kind this superintendent and Pastor Keppel can congratulate themselves upon. And that was written in here. I think that really says a lot for what J.S. Yaggi did at that time. There's also something here. The Sunday school was started by Pauline Clement Gordon, and it was held only in the summertime until 1895, when Mary Yaggi Weaver was superintendent, and it was held year-round from that time on. Also lists the superintendents beginning in 1858, which Jacob Yaggi Sr. is listed as a superintendent from that time. And farther down, Mary Yaggi in 1894, J.S. Yaggi in 1898, and then J.S. Yaggi Jr. In 1938. So it lists all those different Yaggis. Also, when the new cemetery was bought, I believe it would have been across the road. There's a cemetery across the road from the church. The committee that was formed to buy that included J.S. Yaggi, and the treasurer of that committee was Emmanuel Yaggi. So they were all involved very much in this church. The picture on the front is of the church as it looked at that time. This church on the cover here burned to the ground in 1945, I think. Christmas Eve, 1945.
When after it burned, they were right here.
All the church services until the new church was built, they were all held here in Mile Branch at that time. So the church and Mile Branch have been in unison for a long time, doing a lot of things. But I'd like to, just a couple things. Again, this is a drawing that was made approximately, I'm guessing, I haven't found out yet, in the 1880s. Pencil drawing. Circuit riders, if you call them, will go around and make pencil drawings for a price of your property. This is pretty much still how it looks today. If you get a chance later, you can take a look at this picture. This is of the house after it was remodeled at one point. Elizabeth and her husband John Beetler are standing on the porch. Again, this is approximately 1885 to 1895. She passed away in 1896, so it looks like it's pretty close to that time. John Beetler, which is her husband, purchased this property in 1881, which I have a deed for. And subsequent deeds before that for the same property back to 1844. And it's just so much history there, just in that one spot. But this is what the house looked like at that time. And then further down is what the farm developed into. This is approximately 1870 of the same building. 1970. And one interesting thing, the house is a log cabin inside. It's not open inside, but the wall inside the walls is a two-story log cabin. And at some point, I'm going to try to find out who lived there and who built around that log cabin. But that is still in the current walls. This is Elizabeth's daughter, their only child, Emma. This is their wedding picture, Emma, and she married the boy next door, which was my great-grandfather, Ernest Harlan. And this is just a real nice wedding picture of them, Elizabeth and John's only daughter. And we have an older picture of them which is possibly what Elizabeth may have looked like if she'd have lived past age 47. So I wrote that in there. It's something to maybe look at too. Does anybody know the wedding date of Elizabeth and John? Would anybody have any idea on that? I have not been able to find that, so that would be my question on that. I have no, everything I've looked at doesn't list the wedding date. We have, of course, the birth and the death dates of her, and also John, interestingly enough, came from Switzerland as well. At the age of 15, he came over and moved to Alliance. And at some point, the following years, purchased this property. I believe they were around 20 years old. That would put it at 1870, approximately, that they might have gotten married. And in 1881, moved to this property. And just had the one child. So if anybody has that in their paper somewhere, I sure would like to know the exact wedding date of that couple.
This may be an appropriate point to stop, but let me just add a quick footnote. When Mary mentioned Mary Yaggi Weaver, who's the oldest daughter of Christian and Cindy Yaggi. I have a copy of her obituary here, which refers to the fact that for 10 consecutive years she was the church school superintendent. But also a little further down, since we're in this building, I think I should read the fact that she held offices in the Mile Branch and the Fairmount subordinate ranges and was an active member of the state range. Mary Yaggi.
Also, Elizabeth's gravesite is just within yards of Jacob's over at Bethel. Elizabeth was buried there at Bethel.
Well, thank you very much. Very interesting. Well, one more question, or one more question.
I have 5 pieces of furniture of Emmanuel Yaggi in my home. I have 3 stores. And the pictures are here. And I have, this is the home, the brick home where we all were born. Keep that down the road.
It'll be on the table there if you want.
Right here, and then I have...
It's a little hard to see it.
Yeah, I have the more modern version of it, too. And I have Aunt Abe, which was the Yaggi, Gerber. I have no wedding pictures here. I have a book here that Emmanuel Yaggi started the Knox Township Public Schools. He was on the board. I found that in this paper. So if anybody wants to look through this, and also, I don't know, this here, my sister says that nobody else has a picture of this Yaggi. Uncle Frank Yaggi, he died, I think, when he was 70, and I have a picture of him.
There are pictures of some furniture from
yes, it's all
Christian Yaggi home also there if you want to look at it. And it's the Union Cup that was used in the Christian and it's in the Yaggi home on the table. But I think there's going to be opportunity to walk by and look at that here.
I want to say that this has been a wonderful Yaggi reunion evening, and I want to thank those that participated in the program. But there are 3 people that I think each deserve an applause. And the first one is John Robert Yaggi. And the second is Jim McFarland. The third one is Jim's reunion assistant, mentor, and father, Dave McFarland.